Good morning.
Good morning.
So I really appreciate being able to be here this morning to share my experience practicing Buddhism, as well as my thoughts on creating hope, which sounds like we could all use a double dose of. Dealing with depression and hopelessness has always been my biggest challenge. As a child, I was surrounded by uncertainty. We moved to a different city every few years, almost like clockwork. My older sister repeatedly ran away from home, and my father was drunk and losing his job and temper. I was afraid of almost everything. I survived this turmoil by creating obsessive structure in my daily habits and trying to make people laugh, figuring that anyone who thought I was funny wouldn't hurt me. But this emotional band-aid was far from a permanent fix. I spent most of my teens in the 1960s taking too many DRUGSs, in case there's kids here, and unable to function at school. I kept losing jobs, hung out with equally dysfunctional friends, and thought about ending my life. At 18 years old, I hit rock bottom and was desperate to change. I was lucky, through a quirk of hippie fate, to have both my wife and a spiritual practice enter my life. I'm still somewhat amazed that everything has turned out the way it has. When I first spied Trudy at a high school dance, I wasn't thinking about mating for life. I wasn't thinking about anything like that. I was more fixated on her attractive cheerleader legs and her bright smile. A few dates later, I fell madly in love. I asked her to run away with me. But it wasn't until we ran away together in June of 1969, on the day of her high school graduation, that I appreciated how committed she was to both our happiness, and still is. However, the uncertainties of my own life and the turbulent world around me, including the Vietnam War, had me practically paralyzed with fear. Fortunately, a young man invited us to a Buddhist discussion meeting in Santa Monica while we were waiting in our 1956 Chevy for the battery to be charged. We were planning on living in the back seat. At the meeting, we learned that the deepest prayer of Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha that we all learned about in ancient India, as well as Nichiren Daishonin, the Japanese founder of our SGI lay Buddhist practice in the 13th century, was to relieve human suffering, which in general was probably the purpose for most religions in the beginning. At just 18 and 19 years old, I lacked vital communication skills, and so did my wife. I struggled with depression, and she struggled with me struggling with depression. Activities like most people took for granted, like working an 8-hour day, were beyond my emotional grasp. Also, I thought she was too judgmental, and she thought that I was very irresponsible. I know she was right. We definitely weren't seeing the Buddha or enlightened nature in each other. A senior in faith explained when we were younger that as long as we blamed each other for our problems, we would never be happy. Right? He also said that rather than facing each other, we should sit side by side as we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and face our enlightened selves, which are mirrored in a mandala. It's a scroll about this big, that Nichiren Buddhists chant to each day. It's basically like a mirror to our inner life. What followed has been a 47-year journey of chanting every day to polish our enlightened natures, overcoming numerous obstacles and consistently working to improve our relationship. The result has been an absolutely wonderful life together. Now, the emphasis on audible chanting as opposed to silent meditation reflects a core belief or aspect of Nichiren Buddhism. In addition to exploring our private inner life, our religious practice emphasizes the active practice of bringing forth our highest inner potential in relation to and for the benefit of our fellow humans in society, very similar to your own mission. And Nichiren said, "The voice does the Buddha's work." For Nichiren Buddhists, the daily practice of chanting Myoho Renge Kyo is the engine that powers this active hope. It is how, in the words of Nichiren, we become the master of our mind instead of letting our mind master us. This awareness or consciousness represents our true eternal self. The revolutionary aspect of Nichiren Buddhism is that it seeks to directly bring forth the energy of this consciousness, the enlightened nature of a Buddha, purifying the other more superficial layers of our senses, our subconscious, and our karma. There's a pronunciation guide somewhere in the program. It says how to, just the words that we would try chanting together. The word nam roughly means to dedicate oneself. I would like to point out in the 1970s, I attended a lecture on the word nam, and it was 3 nights long. So do you have a lot of time today? So it's very deeper than just simple words can explain. But in general, nam comes from namu, like devotion to. We take on the characteristics of things we namu to. So we namu through our practice to myoho, which signifies the mystic or universal law. Like electricity, you can turn the switch on and off, the lights go on whether you believe in electricity or not, assuming the power's on. Renge symbolizes the lotus flower, which grows in a muddy swamp and becomes a beautiful flower, like our lives. It also represents the simultaneity of cause and effect. Finally, kyo is sound, a voice teaching or sutra. So as we chant together several times, you can think of it as tapping into your inner wisdom and compassion to be able to overcome whatever obstacles you are facing in your daily life and for a more peaceful and joyful world. So let's try it maybe 7 or 8 times. So it goes. And you can do it out loud, please, but it doesn't have to be really loud. Nam yo ho renge kyo. 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 Daisaku Ikeda, the president of our lay Buddhist organization, has said that Buddhism identifies a vast cosmos deep within life. This cosmos contains boundless treasure and goodness, and is reverently called the Buddha nature. This radiant nature is inherent in all living beings, everyone. Each inner cosmos, each of our lives, is connected together to the evolving greater external universe. Since the self and the phenomena are all one, all things are interrelated. In other words, all of us exist because of our relationship with other beings. And nothing in the human or non-human world exists in isolation, even if we like to believe it does. It is because of this that treating others with respect and dignity is so important. Because of the importance of taking responsibility for our own individual karma, or the causes we've made in the past, it was tempting to merely blame myself for my circumstances when I was younger. But the liberating aspect of this concept is that since I shaped my environment, I also have the power to change it for the better, as opposed to being a victim. It isn't intended to make me feel guilty for all that is wrong, but to make me feel empowered to improve it. For the first time, I began to truly look inside myself for the solution to my problems. Tolstoy said, "Death is more certain than the morrow, than night following day, than winter following summer. Why is it then we prepare for the night and for the winter time, but do not prepare for death?" We must prepare for death, but there's only one way to prepare for death, and that is to live well. This quote summarizes my frustration growing up. I desperately wanted someone to tell me how to live well. It seemed to me that everyone else had it figured out. It was a got it club that for some unknown reason I wasn't invited to join. Members of this group could take chances, travel to new places, go on sleepovers, be popular, and excel at sports, none of which I could do. They got to live and sleep without fear. Because there was no one around to tell me otherwise, I grew up with the mistaken impression that most human beings, including my friends and family, operated without worry, that it was only me that was screwed up. My spiritual practice helped me to embrace these fears. This has been a gradual process as opposed to a blinding flash of inspiration. Like peeling back one layer of an onion skin at a time, I became aware of how often my pretend futures, my mind fabricates pretend futures. For instance, worrying about whether one of our daughters or grandkids was okay, or whether Trudy would have another MS relapse. We all have the ability to create extra drama in our lives, don't we? Every single time I get up in the morning and chant, I take concrete steps to overcome the internal fears that paralyze me. I find tremendous hope in this. Ikeda said, if we cannot feel hope, it is time to create some. We can do this by digging deeper within, searching for even a glimmer of light, for the possibility of a way to break through the impasse before us. Now, fundamental premise of Nichiren Buddhism is that the condition of Buddhahood or enlightenment exists within each human being. This is why we don't focus on an external statue of the historical Buddha Shakyamuni. Our Buddhism realizes that this was not his intention. We all have the potential to be Buddhas, enlightened individuals who make a difference in the world, regardless of our race, creed, sexual orientation, or political persuasion. This is the ultimate source of hope for humanity. Rather than exist in isolation by itself, this inner enlightenment manifests itself within our lives at the same time we're experiencing joy, desire, tranquility, anger, learning, or the urge to help others. In other words, the condition of enlightenment exists in daily life, not after we die. Well, maybe it exists then too. But a man confined to a prison cell, for instance, might find the inner strength to take college courses and inspire his fellow inmates. On the other hand, a successful professional, I live with tons of them where I live, in a beautiful mansion might be racked with emotional pain and anxiety. This realization had a tremendous impact on my attitude toward my life and those around me. The act of polishing my Buddha nature every day has enabled me to build a happy marriage, a loving family, emotional health, which I thought was impossible, and a rewarding career. We were living in Virginia when my wife, Trudy, first got multiple sclerosis in 1966. She was paralyzed from the waist down. Our lives could have easily plunged into darkness. However, through our Buddhist practice and the support of a wonderful psychotherapist, we began to experience tremendous joy, compassion, and ultimately great victories, including her being able to walk again. This journey back to better health began with hope and actually resulted us in being happier than ever. Hope is akin to trust. If we could see it, there'd be no need for trust or hope. But hope is not avoiding what is going on in the world. Instead, fostering hope involves looking directly at our reality and making the decision to improve it. The kind of hope I'm referring to is not grounded in wishful thinking. In fact, powerful hope, what's been called active hope, may not be possible without going through despair. It is during the darkest days that we need to persevere, trusting that hope is ahead. When confronted by a cruel reality such as we have recently, we need to create hope. We can do this by digging deeper within, searching for even a small glimmer of light, for the possibility of a way to begin to break through the impasse before us. And our capacity for hope can be strengthened by these difficult circumstances. Hope begins from this challenge, this effort to strive toward an ideal, however distant it may seem. I believe that the ultimate tragedy in life is not physical death. Rather, it is the spiritual death of losing hope, giving up on our own possibilities for growth. The problems that face our world are daunting in their depth and complexity. They also were when I was a kid, and probably when my parents were a kid, and so on. Sometimes it may be hard to see where or how to begin. But let's not be paralyzed by despair. Instead, let's each take action toward the goals that we have set and in which we believe. Rather than passively accepting things as they are, we must embark on the challenge of creating a new reality.
Amen.
Thank you. It is in that effort that true undying hope is to be found. Václav Havel, the ex-president of Czechoslovakia, said in his essay, Orientation of the Heart. My wife jokingly says, because she's gone to some of these with me, I don't make her go to all of them, it's not fair. She said, Mike, you could save everyone 18 minutes of listening to you just by saying this quote, hope is a state of mind, not a state of the world.
Amen.
Yes.
That's it, isn't it?
Yes.
And every morning I get up and I remind myself, okay, hope is the state of my mind, not the state of the world. Because if it's the state of the world, I'm a victim and I have no control over my own inner happiness. And I'm no good to anybody if I'm not happy myself.
Amen. Absolutely.
Which is really amazing when you think that Havel said that hope allows one to live with dignity and meaning, considering it was in short supply in his life. I mean, he experienced Soviet suppression under seemingly impossible circumstances. 2 years ago, I became the recipient of a Medicare card and found myself yet again pondering the meaning of life. A friend reminded me that age is not an excuse for giving up. Allowing ourselves to grow passive and draw back is a sign of personal defeat. There may or may not be a retirement age at work, but there is no retirement age in life. There have been numerous times over the years that I found myself at a crossroads. Sometimes I had to decide if I wanted to engage in an honest dialogue with a difficult colleague, or to not get entangled in petty gossip and complaints about senior management. I had to choose to overcome my personal frustration or anger to move in a more positive direction. I haven't always succeeded, but fortunately, another Buddhist principle is that regardless of the past, we can make a new determination or pledge each day to learn from our mistakes and contribute to a more harmonious and peaceful society. So every morning I try to renew my own determination and to remember, as Gandhi said, good travels at a snail's pace. Lastly, just a very few words about our entirely lay Buddhist organization, because you may not have heard of us. Over 12 million Soka Gakkai international members in 192 countries and territories develop their lives through daily chanting and by studying the teachings of Nichiren Buddhism. Members and guests share experiences of their practice and study together at monthly discussion meetings at members' homes, and gather once a month to pray for world peace at larger monthly meetings at Buddhist centers across the country. For instance, we have over 100 in the United States. There's a large one in Seattle, one in Tacoma. The SGI actively promotes peace and culture and education based on the belief that positive human potential and respect in the dignity of life. If you'd like further information, I have left a sign-up sheet in the back. You can give me your name and email and phone number, and we'll contact you. If you would, I'm really grateful for being here, actually. I really need to tell you how happy I am to be here. Even the drive up was so beautiful, and just seeing your faces. The fact you're here and not home accepting depression, and you've come here seeking something. And I hope something I've said today has struck you in some way that will be of value. Hope is a promise that the worst thing is not the last thing. This promise that there is always a way out of the muddy swamp of daily life can give us the power to proceed. And it is what we mean when we talk about hope as a resource deep within our lives. It's this power to transform ourselves and the world around us. Through a persistent daily spiritual practice, we can manifest our enlightened nature. The choice is ours. And that is why we should never lose hope. Thank you.